once to foreign parts. He succeeded in doing well, and he would. And eventually he came back and married a rich widow and settled himself down in an out-of-the-world English town to grow roses. You're a Faulkner Ray, you know, Mr. Folliot." Bryce laughed as he made this direct accusation, and sitting forward in his chair, he pointed first to Folliot's face and then to his left hand. "Faulkner Ray," he said, "had an unfortunate gun accident in his youth, which marked him for life. He lost the middle finger of his left hand, and he got a bad scar on his left jaw. There they are, those marks. Fortunate for you, Mr. Folliot, that the police don't know all that I know, for if they did, those marks would have done for you days ago." For a minute or two Folliot sat jogging his leg, a bad sign in him of rising temper, if Bryce had but known it. While he remained silent he watched Bryce narrowly, and when he spoke his voice was calm as ever. "And what use do you intend to put your knowledge to, if one may ask?" he inquired, half sneeringly. "You said just now that you'd no doubt that man Glassdale could be bought, and I'm inclining to think that you're one of those men that have their price. What is it?" "We've not come to that," retorted Bryce. "You're a bit mistaken. If I have my price, it's not in the same commodity that Glassdale would want. But before we do any talking about that sort of thing, I want to add to my stock of knowledge. Look here, we'll be candid. I don't care a snap of my fingers that Brake or Braden's dead, or that Collishaw's dead, nor if one had his neck broken and the other was poisoned. But whose hand was that which the mason, Varner, saw that morning, when Brake was flung out of that doorway? Come now, whose?" "Not mine, my lad," answered Folliot confidently. "That's a fact." Bryce hesitated, giving Folliot a searching look, and Folliot nodded solemnly. "I tell you, not mine," he repeated. "I'd naught to do with it." "Then who had?" demanded Bryce. "Was it the other man, Flood? And if so, who is Flood?" Folliot got up from his chair, and, cigar between his lips and hands under the tails of his old coat, walked silently about the room for a while. He was evidently thinking deeply, and Bryce made no attempt to disturb him. Some minutes went by before Folliot took the cigar from his lips, and leaning against the chimney-piece, looked fixedly at his visitor. "Look here, my lad," he said earnestly, "you're no doubt, as you say, a good hand at finding things out, and you've doubtless done a good bit of ferreting, and done it well enough in your own opinion. But there's one thing you can't find out, and the police can't find out either, and that's the precise truth about Braden's death. I'd no hand in it. It couldn't be fastened on to me anyhow." Bryce looked up and interjected one word. "Collishaw?" "Nor that either," answered Folliot hastily. "Maybe I know something about both, but neither you nor the police nor anybody could fasten me to either matter. Granting all you say to be true, where's the positive truth?" "What about circumstantial evidence?" asked Bryce. "You'd have a job to get it," retorted Folliot. "Supposing that all you say is true about past matters, nothing can prove, nothing, that I've ever met Braden that morning. On the other hand, I can prove easily that I never did meet him. I can account for every minute of my time that day. As to the other affair, not an ounce of direct evidence." "Then it was the other man!" exclaimed Bryce. "Now then, who is he?" Folliot replied with a shrewd glance. "A man who by giving away another man gave himself away would be a damned fool," he answered. "If there is another man." "As if there must be!" interrupted Bryce. "Then he's safe," concluded Folliot. "You'll get nothing from me about him." "And no one can get at you except through him?" asked Bryce. "That's about it," assented Folliot laconically. Bryce laughed cynically. "A pretty coil," he said with a sneer. "Here, you talked about my price. I'm quite content to hold my tongue if you would tell me something about what happened 17 years ago." "What?" asked Folliot. "You knew Brake. You must have known his family affairs," said Bryce. "What became of Brake's wife and children when he went to prison?" Folliot shook his head, and it was plain to Bryce that his gesture of dissent was genuine. "You're wrong," he answered. "I never at any time knew anything of Brake's family affairs, so little indeed that I never even knew he was married." Bryce rose to his feet and stood staring. "What!" he exclaimed. "You mean to tell me, even now, you don't know that Brake had 2 children, and that oh, it's incredible!" "What's incredible?" asked Folliot. "What are you talking about?" Bryce, in his eagerness and surprise, grasped Folliot's arm and shook it. "Good heavens, man," he said. "Those 2 wards of Ransford's are Brake's girl and boy. Didn't you know that, didn't you?" "Never," answered Folliot. "Never. And who's Ransford, then?" "I never heard Brake speak of any Ransford. What game is all this? What?" Before Bryce could reply, Folliot suddenly started, thrust his companion aside, and went to one of the windows. A sharp exclamation from him took Bryce to his side. Folliot lifted a shaking hand and pointed into the garden. "There," he whispered. "Hal and what's this mean?" Bryce looked in the direction pointed out. Behind the pergola of rambler roses the figures of men were coming towards the old well house, led by one of Folliot's gardeners. Suddenly they emerged into full view, and in front of the rest was Mitchington, and close behind him the detective, and behind him Glassdale. End of chapter 25.